Today, I am excited to share my biggest room renovation to date. This is a DIY bathroom renovation almost 2 years in the making. So let's get started on Modern Builds. This is the bathroom that we are starting off with, and it needs some love. And make sure you stay to the end of the video where we've got a full cost breakdown. The first step in this project was tearing out the old linoleum floors, and these things were really stuck on there pretty decent. I needed to remove the toilet before I could take out the floors here where the shower is going to eventually be. I'm getting rid of this one and installing a corner toilet. You'll see. So this is not the best news. I'm not sure what was happening down here, but we've got a leak and the subfloor is starting to bubble up a little bit. The rest of the floors are out though, and I'll get a plumber here soon. The next step was removing trim around the door, which I should have done now looking back in hindsight.
Whoa! This used to have some interesting wallpaper.
This bathroom is a full gut renovation, so I'm taking out all of these accessories and fixtures.
Oh man! Another wallpaper!
Including this old light and what I thought was a porcelain sink until I tried to remove it.
Alright, I'm just breaking it. I can't get it. Ah, it's not porcelain, it's metal.
My new approach was to cut out the drain using the jigsaw and then just pry it loose. And here in a second, you'll be able to see a big chunk of the original wallpaper. Pretty ugly. I did these steps while I was demoing out the rest of the house, so I had a dumpster on site, and that was super handy. After some basic drywall repairs and a little texturing, I applied a coat of primer and then 2 coats of white paint. And with the ceiling and walls taken care of, I could focus back down on the floors. We made an access hole running these new PEX lines, and I needed to cut out and replace this piece of plywood that was water damaged anyways. I plunge cut this out with the circular saw, and I did keep just a little bit of subfloor where the plumbing was going through. I just didn't want to mess with that. The subfloor did come out in layers, but I didn't damage any of the plumbing, so that's good. I just scabbed on this little piece to the bottom of the decking, that way I could fill this void. I had a plywood piece that was the exact right thickness, so I nailed that in, and then I caulked it in so it was all watertight and weather sealed before putting in the new plywood subfloor. I did it in 3 sections, and it was the only way I could think of working around these pipes. But it worked.
I've also got this pretty big hole that we cut in the subfloor of the bathroom so that we could have access to go underneath the house to run the new PEX lines and drains since we're rearranging everything. Right here where there used to be a toilet, we put this drain so that we can now have a shower in this nook. And now that toilet is going right here in the corner where we installed this drain and water line.
Closing this big opening seemed pretty straightforward. I added some new stretchers in between the joists. That way, the new decking would have something to nail onto. This will also help keep the joists tied together, and that's a good thing. I was also happy thinking this was the last time I was gonna need to be getting under the house. But you'll also see, I wasn't right again.
I ended up having to trim these pieces quite a bit with my jigsaw, but I am super happy with the fit that I got.
With this new decking down, it was ready for new subfloor.
I'm also going to be replacing this piece of plywood subfloor, but first I'm going to tear out this drywall where the shower is going to be. Let's do it!
Looking back, I was wondering for a second why it took so long for me to remove this drywall, knowing that I was going to do a shower the whole time. But now that I'm looking back, I remember I was really nervous to kind of commit and do all of this demolition. There's really no going back, and there was always the chance that I could just put in a new toilet and keep this renovation simple. But by this time, we had already removed the electrical panel from this wall and moved it to the outside of the house. And for me, there's just too much room not to build out a shower and utilize this space the right way. Like all the other subfloor pieces, this one came out in chunks as well, but I was happy to see that the decking was in really nice shape because we're going to be putting quite a bit of weight with a mortar bed and tile on top of this. I screwed down the new subfloor and I made sure to leave plenty of room so that I could put in a new shower drain. I installed this with 2-part PVC cement.
And you'll want to give it a little bit of a twist to help the cement grab.
And I used spacers so that I could get everything sitting as level as possible. These 2x10s going around the perimeter of the shower is called blocking, and it's just a little bit of extra support so there's no flex in the cement board. My curb is really simple. It's just 3 2x4s high, and we're gonna wrap that in the same tile as the walls. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, a mortar bed is a simple process, but you wanna make sure and do it the right way. There's basically two cement pours. The first one is called a pre-slope, and it's what your shower liner actually sets on. This makes sure that all the water sheds towards the drain, even if water goes through this PVC liner. You don't want that though, that's why I'm folding and sealing all of my seams, and the nail holes are high up past the water line. Then the liner wraps over the curb and you nail it on the outside. These pebbles are also for drainage on the second layer of our mortar bed, the actual sloped pour. This is a lot like the first step, except I'm using the actual drain to screed as my reference. Any water that's able to seep through this mortar bed goes through those pebbles and into the weeping holes. These are just layers of redundancy to make sure that water never gets to your plywood subfloor. With a little bit of reinforcement done, it's time to start cutting the cement board that's going on our walls. This is a scoring knife that I'm using, and after a few passes, it should just break along that seam. Be sure to get the specialized screws if you purchase this, and just like drywall, you don't want to screw too far through the surface of the cement board. In fact, if you have drywall experience, the steps for this are almost the exact same, which is awesome. After sticking on some cement board seam tape, mix up some thin set and apply it to those seams just like drywall joint compound. Then apply a few coats of this Red Guard waterproofing membrane over all of it after it's sanded. This is some pretty thick stuff, and it's best to apply it to the corners with a brush and then I think roll it onto all your flat surfaces. With a roller, you'll probably want to do more than one coat to make sure that you've got a good waterproof membrane, but then you'll be ready for tile. I saw a neat idea on YouTube Shorts for how to make a template for floor tiles, and I decided to give it a try on this Pebble mosaic. I hot glued these 2x4 strips around the perimeter of the walls and where the drain's at so that I know where to cut each individual tile. I made sure each one was labeled so that they could go back in place exactly where they were. Using this method made installation super easy. I used white thin set mortar because I'll be using white grout, and I made sure to wiggle each piece into that mortar so that they were all setting in there really well. These grout lines were pretty interesting. I had to use the grout float in every direction to make sure it was really embedded in there. But man, it looks awesome once it's all cleaned up. Moving on.
I can't really move on until I take care of this gap between the window and the drywall, or where the shower's gonna be. It was tucked with plastic bags for insulation, and I got that cleared out. And now I'm gonna use some pink insulation and stuff that in there everywhere I can get it, and then I'll throw on a few pieces of drywall so that our window will be centered in this opening.
I know people in the comments are probably gonna roast me for doing this out of order. It was something that I overlooked and didn't realize had to be taken care of until it had to be taken care of. But I did make sure to Red Guard over this repair so that it's all still waterproof.
So our window is prepped, and now it's time to install our 4-foot by 18-inch wood slat style tile. Nice rhyme. I want the first full piece to be centered on the back wall. So to make sure this is all done right, I made marks where I want that to be, and then I used my new laser level to mark those lines across all 3 walls. Doing this made pre-cutting and then installing all of these pieces a breeze. And really, installation on this back wall went really smooth, and I'm excited for the 2 next to it. To cut the majority of these pieces to length, I'm gonna be using this 24-inch capacity tile cutter. This uses a scoring wheel where you want the tile to break, and you'll be surprised at just how clean of a break you can get with a tool like this.
I also pre-cut a few unique pieces like this one that's gonna go where the valve is to turn the shower on and off. I used a diamond blade on my angle grinder to work around this curve, and you can see how it's a really nice fit. That's gonna work perfect. And a diamond hole saw is what you wanna use to create the hole for your shower head to go through.
A perfect fit. And just FYI, I am using large format tile mortar. I don't know how this formula is different than other mortar, but anytime you've got a tile with a side longer than 18 or 24 inches, they say it's best to use that, so that's what I'm doing.
Now my mortar has just a little more water than I would have wanted. You can see how it starts to droop and sag just a little bit over time. A perfect mix is gonna stay stiff. I used wedge spacers on the floor so that I could adjust and level each tile on the bottom row. Then I used leveling spacers in between each tile so that they were all sitting on the same plane. Whenever you're tiling, it's important that you get your first row flat and level because this is what everything else is going to be referencing. So if you're off here, everything else is going to be wonky. Just like the floor tiles, you want to press and wiggle these into place, and I also found soft taps with a rubber mallet really helped move and shape these around a little bit. And yes, I know I'm a very messy tiler, but I'm really happy that I pre-cut all my pieces so I didn't have to go back and forth.
Perfect. Woo. And I don't want to stop the edge of our tile right here. I really want to extend it 2 full slats before we put our trim next to it.
I used this handheld tile saw to make the cuts, and it's got the same diamond blade that I used on my angle grinder earlier, but you can pair it with a straight edge.
And the trim that I'm going to be using is this 1/2-inch L-shaped edging. I really like this satin finish. I'm going to measure basically floor to ceiling with this, making sure I've got room for my LVT flooring. And what's awesome is you can cut this stuff with basically any woodworking tools because it's made out of aluminum, which is soft enough for woodworking blades, like a jigsaw or a chop saw. All right, let's get these edge pieces in, and wall number 2 complete.
I didn't have my camera rolling, but I did accidentally break one of these long, thin pieces, so make sure you're really careful if you make something similar. Just use even pressure when you're setting these into the mortar, and you should be all good. Just be careful, take my word for it.
And now after everything's installed, the edge looks pretty dang square.
And with that done, we have saved our toughest wall for last. Let's see how our pre-cutting went. First, I installed the bottom row, and this really went the exact same way as the other wall. I just made sure it was all super level and lined up with our reference lines we made with the laser level earlier. Tiling around the shower niche was a little tough because of that thin strip to the left side of it. But so far, so good, everything's lining up.
This first set of cutouts look awesome, let me show you.
The reveal is consistent all the way around. With a little bit of grout, it's gonna look super pro. As I was approaching the top row, I did get a little bit nervous because this is where cumulative error would set in if I did make any mistakes in the initial measurements or in my cuts. But my reveal around this niche looked awesome. And once this piece of trim goes in, that means all of our wall tile is complete, and that feels really good.
And we're now down to our last piece. Awesome.
That's 1-800-SUPER-PRO.
Okay, our shower wall is complete, and I am very happy with the results so far. The last thing I've got left is this curve right here. I'm going to be setting my tile saw up to a 45-degree angle. That way I can miter the wood slat tiles and have a seamless wrap around the curb.
By creating these miters that join together around the curb, the grain will flow around it so it looks just like wood. I used a scrap piece of the flooring I'm using to try and make sure that it had room to slide underneath later, and I back buttered these tiles just like the ones I did on the wall. This just gives a little bit of extra spread to the thin set and helps make sure that there's no negative spaces that are easier to crack later on. This is really important on the curb where people will be stepping in and out, and I'm also going to have the shower hardware.
And you can see I wasn't quite getting contact here,
so I just added a little bit more.
but now we will.
And you do want this piece to slope just a little bit towards the shower so water sheds into the pan. On the inside here, that bottom gap is about an 1/8 inch larger than I want. The curb just ended being a little bit higher on the inside than I thought.
Now I think that's gonna end up looking awesome. I'm gonna clean up, and then tomorrow I can remove all of my spacers along with the wedges, which I can keep and reuse, and soon we'll be ready for grout.
And this grout removal tool works awesome for any thin set in your grout lines before application.
So this is the grout that I'm using. The color is called Latte, and it's definitely a little darker in this tub than what it dries to. I did a little test to make sure. It blends in great. And I'll be putting this batch of grout into a grout bag. This should make application quite a bit easier since I only want to get the grout in the grout line. I'm using large format tiles, and there's no sense in getting grout on the face of all of these.
Now, I don't know if it wasn't mixed thin enough, but I really struggled with this grout bag. This is sped up a ton.
That's just too hard, holy crap.
I eventually just went manual with it. Even though it was a little bit messier, I still needed to use the grout float to get this worked into those lines anyways. So I think I would have been stuck cleaning up all those vertical grooves anyways. And this really wasn't that bad. Way easier than the grout bag. If anybody knows what I did wrong, please let me know in the comments because I've had that issue a couple of times when I tried.
I can't wait to see that reveal once it's dry.
And I don't want to hype myself up, but this color Latte is the perfect match for these tiles. It makes these seams really blend out. I also picked up a siliconized version in a caulk tube so that I could get the seam between the wall tile and the ceiling. And in hindsight, I wish I used masking tape on each side of my caulk line. It definitely would have made cleanup easier since this is silicone instead of latex.
And now I've just got a little more grout that I'm going to use to fill this transition between the wall and the floor tile.
I ended up using a putty knife. I don't know why, but it did work great. And then the grout float to smooth out and round over the corner. After I got rid of all of the excess I could with the grout float, I used a sponge to clean up the rest. This was the last step in tiling and creating this shower, and it felt really rewarding, especially thinking about how far we came. It's a small shower, but it's feeling fancy.
It's no question building out this shower and tiling everything took longer than I expected, but man, it looks so great. And it's only gonna keep looking better. Today, I've got electricians coming by to install lights up here in the ceiling of the shower.
I wasn't in the room when they drilled the first set of holes, and after realizing how close together they were, I realized they would be sitting right over where the shower head is eventually going to be. So we drilled a second set of holes, and I did a quick drywall repair in hopes of making it look like this never happened. I screwed blocking into the existing drywall and then a patch into that blocking so that it was all on the same plane. Then I came back with a little bit of joint compound and filled that void. After some sanding, I did a wide spray of texture so that everything blended out and lightly sanded that so it matched the rest of the ceiling. And no lie, I think most people, unless you showed them, would never notice that those holes were there. Pretty cool.
And now we can reinstall our LED lights.
What's so neat about these is they just twist to connect and they're wet rated without any big recessed can box that goes up into your ceiling.
I am super happy with that patch. I don't think anyone's gonna notice it.
It had been a few months since I opened this box, but it had my valve stem and cover in it. Just make sure to follow the instructions and you shouldn't have any issues. It's pretty straightforward.
And the shower kit came with a matching shower head, but I ordered this huge rainfall shower head, and this is what we're gonna be installing.
This shower arm is a little tricky because it needs to be the exact distance away from the threads. I'm lucky though, all of my measurements worked.
That's gonna be fancy. And now we're gonna test it out. Here we go. Dun 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 dun! It's been a ton of work and it feels so awesome to have this running, and it's so nice. I want to give a big thanks to the sponsor of today's episode, Squarespace. With Squarespace's new design intelligence, creating your own website has never been easier. All you've got to do is type out a little bit about your brand or business and the site you want to create, and you get your own custom tailored website that's super easy to customize yourself from there. And if you do business and need to take payments, Squarespace Payments is the best place to do that all in one spot. Invoicing is easy for customers so that you can get paid fast, and there's a whole host of convenient payment options, including ACH direct deposit, Klarna, Apple Pay, and where eligible, ClearPay and Afterpay. And if you're somebody with expertise, with Squarespace courses, you can turn your knowledge into income. They've got all the tools to build your course from scratch and then set your paywall, whether that's a one-time fee or a recurring subscription charge. So to learn more, follow my link down in the description. That's squarespace.com/modernbuilds. And don't forget to use my code ModernBuilds for 10% off your first site, store, or domain through Squarespace. As always, big thanks to Squarespace and you all for watching. Now let's finish up this bathroom. I have ultimately decided to do a floating vanity on this wall. Online, I found a really cool offset counter so that the sink will sit in the middle of the wall, and there'll be a counter extending this way, but not on the left side, so it doesn't get in the way of the door. But that does mean I need to move this plumbing into the wall. This was a little bit beyond what I was comfortable doing myself, so what I did is lay out exactly where my vanity was going to be on the wall so that the plumber could come in and set the drain and the PEX lines where they should be. This ended up being a huge struggle for him. I remember he was down under the house trying to get that drain pipe up through the wall for like 30 minutes. I think it's something that I probably would have failed at, so I'm really happy that I had a pro tackle this step. I covered up the end of this PVC pipe so that it stays clean, and then I marked where I need to drill for my vanity. That's gonna go right into a stud. How awesome. But what about this one? Uh-oh, doesn't seem good. We'll need to add some 2x4 blocking between these studs.
and I've just progressively made a bigger hole with my drywall saw to check everything out. This was the same day I had electricians come in, and I also had them move this outlet up a few inches so that it wouldn't interfere with the new countertop. That old vanity light we took out in the beginning didn't even have any kind of box, so we put in one. That way we'd have a certified pro install. The electrician stripped and clipped these wires to length, and then folding them back. I'm going to be installing the light fixture once it gets delivered later. Now it's time to get focused back on adding blocking to support this vanity when we hang it. The cabinet that I build is eventually going to add a lot of support underneath as well, but I want to make sure that these bolts going through the drywall have plenty of meat to hold on to and can support this countertop on their own. The timing here also made sense that I did the drywall repair around the plumbing, that way I could let all my joint compound dry together. The first coat I apply always looks a little sloppy, but I make sure to smooth it out and then come back with a second or third coat after sanding. And we're now back to a solid wall. I used this same spray texture on the walls that I used on the ceiling earlier. I used a relatively fine spray, and this matched what I had on the wall pretty well. After a light sanding, this really blended out. I was super happy with it again. Now I think we're at a good pause point on this vanity wall, because I should highlight the fact that when the electricians were over, we also installed this ceiling vent fan above where the toilet is going to go. I was laughing at the time because we also had to relocate this from its original position. We had to scoot over so we didn't hit a ceiling joist, or a rafter I mean. And while that was happening, we were also putting in a new electrical box since this bathroom has all new wiring. We've got 3 switches, one to control the main lights in the bathroom, the second to control the vent fan light or a night light, and the third that'll control the vent fan itself. By now you should know the steps of a drywall repair. We've done it quite a few times in this video, so I'm not gonna bore you with the finer details. Instead, I'll let you know that I've got an affordable drywall tool set from Amazon linked down below, along with all the other tools, materials, and supplies that I used in this project, so make sure and check that out if you're curious. And again, I'm not bragging, but that drywall repair is 1-800-SUPER-PRO. I finished up this ceiling vent installation. It was really simple. I just followed the directions. Now I'll go hit the light switch. There's the light. And there's the fan. And this fan's pretty quiet, but it does cover up a little bit of bathroom noise, which is good. There are no leaks coming from the shower or the new plumbing in the vanity wall, so I'm gonna close up this hole in the floor. Throughout this renovation, I've been using this access point to get underneath the house for quite a few things. Routing and addressing some plumbing fixes, adding new electrical lines. I even spent a couple days underneath the house adding blocking and leveling out the floors. It felt like a long time ago we were patching up this decking and finishing up the subfloor, but we're finally completing it. In the video, I think it's like 15 or 20 minutes, but in real life, it was like 12 or 14 months that opening in the floor was there. I'm glad it's finally closed up. Sturdy. And to level out these subfloors, I'm gonna be using this right here. It's called Henry Feather Finish, and it's a super fine concrete product made for this task. This helps you fill any voids and blend any seams between your subfloor panel. And because it's got basically no rocks in it, it can trowel and taper down to a feather finish. This really is one of my favorite products. I've used it on subfloors, I've used it on tabletops, I've even made custom concrete counters with it at my Joshua Tree place. It's really cool because you can sand it smooth and there's not an aggregate in the way. This helps you feather it out and blend the gaps or seams between any of your panels. I used a Harbor Freight chisel to get rid of any leftover adhesive from the flooring, and we're about ready for the new ones to go down. I probably should have already done it, but I'm gonna take out this old door jamb before we get the new floors in. And my bad here on the blurry shot. I'm also gonna get this toilet flange installed before we get these floors down. Typically, you want to screw the flange down to your finished floor, but I'm doing floating LVP in the house, and I do not want to screw into that. This OD PVC twist and set flange is really convenient for a renovation. It has this gasket that expands when you twist it into place. And the spacers are there so that this will be level with our finished floor. But don't worry, if your flange is a little low, they do make extension rings to go on top. I'm a little bit worried I'm not going to have quite enough of this LVP underlayment that I'm putting on top of the subfloor.
This is what I installed throughout the kitchen and the dining room, and this will help level everything out and give a little bit of cushion when people are walking underneath. Dang it, we're close, but I think I'm short just a few square feet.
I bet if I was a little less reckless around the dining room and kitchen where I installed this, I would have had enough to get through this bathroom, but oh well, it's not a big deal. I did end up finding a solution.
I ran out to the shop and I was really excited to find this Pergo underlayment that is also 1.5 millimeter, the same thickness as this quiet wall.
This is the underlayment that I used in my Airstream renovation. This is technically supposed to go under laminate, not LVP, but shh, don't tell anybody. If you don't, I won't. I'm just kidding. I'm sure this isn't a big deal at all. They were the exact same thickness, so it made a really good even seam.
And now we can move on to flooring. I've got a little bit of a problem. My flooring isn't gonna be able to slide underneath the shower tile here on the curb. I'm gonna use a diamond wheel on my angle grinder to make sure I've got enough of a gap so that my LVP flooring slides underneath this tile. It'll help water shed the way that I want.
And once it's all sealed up, this should be perfect.
All right, let's see if it works. Awesome! That's gonna look so clean.
And yes, I did fix that underlayment that I absolutely destroyed.
It is finally time for floors, and I'm going to be using this beautiful gray wash floor from Floret. This is the Tilden colorway in their Modin LVP collection, and I've got this going seamless throughout the entire house. Now this piece can slide underneath. It's still got wiggle room for expansion and contraction, but it's gonna go underneath all of this tile. And once it's sealed, it'll be really waterproof.
The first row of any flooring is tricky, especially since I had to link together the hallway, work around this little wall, and the shower itself. But once it was down and I knew my outside edge was straight, the rest of the rows went down quick. Luxury vinyl plank is so easy to install.
And to mark and cut LVP, just flip the orientation that it's gonna eventually be installed, then mark where you wanna make your cut, then score it once with your utility knife, and then just snap it. Awesome.
That's one of the biggest upsides of LVP is that you can cut it in place and you don't make a bunch of sawdust or any other kind of mess that makes cutting on site a little bit difficult. For working around odd-shaped items like this toilet flange, a jigsaw is a good item to cut with. And remember, this does not need to be perfect. There's going to be a toilet sitting on top of this floor, so there's going to be plenty of room, and your margins really don't need to be this tight. I used the end of 2 planks to get around this PEX coming out of the floor, and I'll have a flange covering that later. That's flooring complete. I've got a sample pack discount linked below.
Don't mind the eye patch, I got a sty that ended up getting infected. Between that and the thumb, I'm off to a hot start this new year. It's time to install this door, and I'm gonna be installing it backwards. Typically, a door swings into the room. That way you don't accidentally hit somebody walking by in a hallway when you're going in and out. But this bathroom is small, and I wanna preserve this space. Plus, the door can open and stay against this wall, so it's not in the way that bad. Definitely a compromise that I think is worth it.
I used a multi-tool to trim my shims, and then a circular saw with my 12-inch speed square to cut casing to go around it. A lot of people think you need a miter saw to cut trim, but it really is easy with a circular saw as long as you've got a 12-inch speed square. And remember, I'm doing painted trim, so my margins aren't as tight as if they were clear-coated hardwood trim. After the door trim was on, I cut the baseboard trim that's also this square MDF shape. And I always pre-cut the whole room to make sure everything's gonna fit before I paint and nail them in.
Nice, that'll be a good fit.
These trim boards come primed white, but they need 2 or 3 coats of paint before they're really finished. So I apply the first couple coats before installation while it's easier and I'm less prone to make a mess with paint somewhere on the finished floors. I start by nailing low on my trim board, making sure I hit the bottom plate, and then I'm sure I hit a 2x4 stud anywhere higher on my trim. I use a nail punch to make sure the nail heads are below the surface of my trim so I can come back with a little bit of wood filler and sand it smooth before I come back with painter's caulk to make sure that all of my corners, seams, and joints are super nice. A little bit of caulk goes a long way when it comes to a bad miter joint. Since I've already painted the trim, I don't have to paint super low on the boards, and that helps me prevent getting paint on the masking tape where I might accidentally get some bleed on the floor. I also painted around the door casing before removing all of the masking tape, and our room is finally starting to look complete. We are out of the construction zone and we're now into the finishing stage.
This room is really starting to look great. There's no more unfinished surfaces. And since we just finished one door, I figure let's go ahead and do another. The shower door that I picked up has a flat black finish to match the rest of the hardware in the shower.
I set up my laser level to make sure that all of my tile was symmetrical, and I lined up the side rails correctly before pre-drilling holes for the anchors and screws. I start with my diamond bit at an angle so that it gets set and it can't try and drift on me once I start making a straight cut. And remember, anytime you're cutting or drilling through tile, water is your friend. Even though I made sure I put 2x4s behind these tiles, I still put the anchors in just in case. I got an assorted diamond hole saw bit on Amazon. I'll also leave that below. I want to highlight it. It was a fantastic deal. So was the shower door. It was from Amazon, and it was a good deal. I love the way that the black hardware matches everything else. You're going to see it in a minute. It is killer. The second side rail doesn't attach to the tile. Instead, you're going to connect this onto your door assembly. That way it can pivot into place.
And now I'm going to be super careful so I don't break this thing. It's safe to say I'm a little nervous. I wish I had two good eyes.
The shower door can expand and contract a little bit. Basically, it fits a 30 to 34 inch shower opening, something like that. After I pivoted and expanded it as much as I could, I screwed in those side rails into the holes that I drilled earlier. Then I put plastic caps on those screws. I expanded the top as much as I possibly could. Then I screwed through it and put a couple set screws so that this is a really tight and sturdy assembly. The door handle for this is really sleek, also black, but I love the tubular design.
And that's shower complete. Tomorrow morning, I'll get some shots of the shower with daylight, and I bet it's gonna look awesome. And now we're back in the toilet corner, and it's time to get this thing installed. It's got a specialty triangle-shaped tank to fit into this corner space.
I had never heard of, used, or seen a triangle-shaped corner toilet like this, but a little bit of Googling, and I found one. Without a corner toilet like this bathroom redesign really wouldn't be possible. It's what allowed me to take the old toilet nook and turn it into that shower. Before, it was just way too big of a space to justify only having a toilet for, but now we've got this space-saving design and it is really cool. The critical part here is that the toilet rough-in is spaced off of the wall the exact right dimensions. So as long as that's correct, this installation is really simple. Just follow your instructions and it should be good. Oh, and you know we got that soft close seat. Premium!
Let's go. And the sad part is the lid was damaged during shipping. I'll just put this in place for now while a replacement is on the way. Moving on. And the vanity wall is our last big step in this renovation. I'm gonna work from top down, first installing our light.
Wiring here is simple. Just make sure that the electricity is turned off so you don't accidentally shock yourself. Black wires go together, so do the white wires, and then the green one hits that ground screw. This fixture has some weird bulbs. I think it's called a G9 base.
That's a funky light bulb.
But these mini diffused globes are just so neat. Because there's 3 light sources and they're so soft, this really makes your face look nice when you're in the mirror. And now we can finally install these bolts that are gonna hold the floating vanity onto the wall. These have a wood screw on one side and then threads on the other that a nut will screw onto. It's important that you make sure these are level, but it's nice there is a little bit of wiggle room and adjustability once it's on the wall. Since I'm doing this myself, I just used a kickstand to hold it up while I got the nuts threaded on. There's a plastic washer that helps make sure that it's aligned and protected, and I used a ratchet with a socket to tighten this quick. With that complete, I installed my faucet, and once again, I went with the matte black finish to match the other accessories. And I did get really lucky with the length of these hot and cold lines going to the pecs. There's really not any slack, so they look really good while they're exposed, even though I do plan on building a cabinet so that all of this plumbing is covered. These little 1/2-inch flanges really came in handy for this project. I like the white finish. And I tried to do an all black P-trap, but I did end up needing an extension, and it was white at Home Depot. The last thing for this wall was hanging the mirror, and it came with a couple of small metal French cleats. I drilled holes for the drywall anchors that came with it, and this definitely should be strong enough to hold a mirror.
These windowsills are in pretty rough shape, but we're gonna get them cleaned up. I'll start by grabbing the random orbit sander with 150 grit sandpaper to get through some of the imperfections and old paint layers in this wood so it's smooth to the touch. After that, I'll level the windowsills out because they've shifted a little over time. I lost one piece of trim, so I'm gonna have to replace that with a new board.
I just perused around the Home Depot section until I found a match, and I leveled it all out.
I'm gonna paint this so that it matches the baseboard trim. It's actually the same paint that's on the walls. Then I'll use latex caulk to make sure that all of my gaps and seams are sealed up.
And then I let that cure overnight.
I woke up today and my eye is looking much better, so that's awesome. And now I want to add a little bit of privacy to these windows. I picked up this roll of frosted glass film and I'll cut 4 pieces to rough size. I've already cleaned these windows really well using a razor blade to scrape anywhere I needed.
And to install this, you peel away the protective film, then spray a little bit of water onto the back of the film and onto the glass. This lets you move and position it before you cut off the excess and then squeegee it into place. I'm pretty sure this was my first time using frosted glass film, and I really did like it. I didn't get perfect results. I think it was a B+. There was a couple small air bubbles here and there from where I lifted and then repositioned it. I had a couple tiny dust particles get between the glass and the film. And to add a little bit more privacy, my friends at Smart Wings sent me these DIY smart roller shades that are remote controlled. What's so special about these is they've got a rechargeable battery on the inside so that you don't have to do any special wiring or electrical work. I went with 100% blackout shades, but you can also get different percentages of light diffusion. Links are below.
You can control these easily with a remote. They're also programmable with things like Alexa or an Apple HomeKit so that they can all go up and down together automatically. I already should have removed this dryer vent that's going through the wall and the exterior brick, but I'm just gonna add this cap to it for now until I can get it removed and that brick on the outside repaired.
And with that, our DIY bathroom renovation is complete. Let's go back to before we did any work on this space. It was cramped, and let's not forget, it was only a sink and a toilet. There was no shower. There was just a single pull chain light and an electrical panel being in the way of where a shower should be. And now let's check out the afters. I don't know about you, but I 1000% love the style of this renovation. I typically never use black hardware and accessories, but I'm really digging the look, and this has me rethinking everything. Taking a poop nook and turning it into a luxury shower is next level. I think it's gonna do huge things for the equity of this house. And it's not just on paper the fact that it's now a 3-bed, 2-bath. We now have a fancy bathroom, especially compared to what we had before. All of the lighting throughout is great, and this vanity light is cool because you've got 3 diffused light sources hitting your face, and that makes you look good. And next week, I plan on building a custom floating cabinet for underneath this vanity. So subscribe. The wood look tile is great to balance out the gray wash floors and bring a little bit of that warm tone in. And let's give it up for the star of the show, the corner toilet. Without this whole project wouldn't really be possible. Or at least this layout.
This all came out looking great, but next week I'm gonna be building a custom cabinet to hide all of this. So make sure and subscribe. In total, I spent about $3,500 on this renovation. But it is my guess that we have increased the value of this house by $50,000.
An average bathroom addition increases your home's value by $20,000 to $50,000.
I've seen a lot of resources say adding a second bath can increase the value of your home by about 20%, even more. And without any other equity improvement in the house, that would be at least $40K. So I really believe a $50K estimate is relatively conservative. But who's to say? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Make sure and like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on Mike's First Flip. It's Mike's First Flip. Bye, everybody.